Check. Yes. Working. Hello. Good morning. Welcome. I need to speak more quietly, I think. Just waiting for the green light. And the door is locked. You're in for me. Okay. Welcome. After the keynote, you just decided to join this session. It's very loud. Let's try it this way. Introduction to GOVC and Json Query. You didn't make a mistake and just came in the wrong room by mistake, right? So, we're going to talk about automation of vSphere. Does this sound okay? It sounds a bit...
It's a bit of an echo.
Yeah. Need to get... Don't know that I can... I'll try to speak more quietly. I don't... it's going to be Linux style. So if you're more Windows, you'll learn some stuff, but it's going to be very much Linux. And using this typically with the Linux approach of combining commands through pipe. Check. We'll see. And bash scripts. Fine for everyone? It's going to be low level, right? Who am I? This is me. My name is Eric. I used to work for VMware in the Tanzu division. I think they have this microphone because they're recording the session, but they should have checked the sound. Don't know if I can check. Check. Can you hear me okay? Better?
Yeah. Yes.
Sorry for the video recording. So, working at VMware in the Tanzu division, so funky stuff with Kubernetes mainly. Before that, worked at Dell EMC and so forth. But basically, I've been working with VMware technology for the best part of the last 20 years. So I know a thing or two, and I still have plenty to learn. The GOVC. First, I'm going to give you some hints about what I used it for. Right? I used to be a pre-sales, but a very hands-on pre-sales. Like, okay, PowerPoint is nice, but I like to play with stuff. As a pre-sales, especially Eric, I had to work on proof of concept labs, advanced labs, so I need to create labs. And within the pre-sales, we have to build all kinds of labs with all form flavors. And this is a small project that we use to do that. This is technology that we use to build up labs. You need version 7, version 8, this build, whatever, and build all kinds of setups, right? In an automated way, fully network integrated with BGP, so that was kind of funky, right? And we had several labs all over the place in Europe and the US, and I was maintaining the code for that over SSH tunnel. And it was running on small Linux VMs to run all the code. So I needed something lightweight to be able to connect everywhere. I'm going to use some part of the code of that project as examples for this session. That's interesting. If you want to leverage that, you can go and look in the code, not to use the code as such, but you can see code snippets that might help you with some of those commands. I mentioned that I worked in the Tanzu division, so Kubernetes. One specific version of the Kubernetes that we used had this kind of YAML as description of how the cluster should look like. Which network should it connect to? And you can see the little red squares actually contain a specific way of identifying the network and so forth. This is kind of like coming from that Golang, GoVC approach of going through the structure of the VMware objects. And you have to provide that. As I am personally very lazy, I don't know about you, but I'm lazy, and I like to avoid typos. I ended up, writing little scripts that use GoVC to just, point to the vCenter, and then you just say, okay, this is the data centers that you have. Which one you want? These are the clusters that you have. Which one you want? And so, like, pick and choose without having to type, and eventually it would just generate the YAML file that then I could use to generate the cluster. An example of that. In those setups, we can also do some very funky setup, like multi-data setup, and we use certain technology in that cluster API for Kubernetes. That's all VMware, right? But you don't only run VMware on VMware, so some other vendors as well have some documentation and hint on how to deploy their technology on VMware. And as it is also readable, it's a bit light, they also use GoVC because it's very handy on Linux, and then you can do some very interesting setup. So, just to give you a few hints of project and use cases where I've been using that technology. Now, I've been mentioning GoVC a few times now. Anyone here knows about GoVC, has used GoVC? What? Cool. If you see any mistake, you just scream. So, GoVC CLI is actually available on GitHub. It's maintained by VMware team engineering. It's actually using Golang, right? And the GoVC CLI, which I'm very proud to also give you explanation on how to pronounce it, because it's very important, right? Is kind of like a subset of the GovMummy interface, which is like the library that they use to interface with the vSphere API in Golang. Right? So, nice, I'm not a Go programmer. Good news is you don't need to be one to use it because it's just a CLI. And actually it's compiled for you, so it's very quick. So you just go to the release on GitHub and you get the latest version or greatest version. And that's why you've got the binaries in zip format or TART format for every platform that you might want. Like use macOS, we've got the Darwin one, we've got Linux, we've got the Linux flavors. Even for the Windows users, there is a version, right? And so basically you just download that, you uncompress, and it's ready to go. It's just an executable. Handy. No large setup, no complex stuff to do. Once you have that in your, CLI, you just type GoVC. And then you get a lot of text like, okay, nice, but you need to give me more information, like what do you want me to do, right? And it's basically like GoVC and a command and some parameters. And parameters, there are aplenty, right? So GoVC is used to interface with vCenter or ESXi. Where is vCenter? How do I authenticate and so forth? Well, that's why we're going to use what we call environmental variables, right? To set those parameters so that GoVC knows what to do. Very simple. And another important little parameter, depending on is this one, because as the title said, we're going to use GoVC in combination with Json Query, JQ. Anyone use JQ? Used to that? You'll learn a lot today. Good. That's what the user group is for. Now, to set up environment variable, that's very simple. We need the GoVC username, the GoVC password. In this case, I'm using just simple ones, right? I'm going to assign them straight into the variable. Obviously, keeping the password in clear text like that is not the greatest thing for security. That's why you could change that by a few lines of code to query, request to type it and then get that into that variable. But for the sake of the example here, kept it simple. You've got the GOVC URL, which is a pointer to the vCenter instance. And then some other elements that we can set up, like GOVC Insecure is a very handy one, because all of you have a signed certificate assigned to vCenter that is fully trusted, yes. If that's not the case, just set that to 1 and let's go. So for the sake of demos and what I do is just I create a small file with that content, and then you just source that, so it reads and executes that, and then off you go. You can then type the command govc ls, for example, and it's going to query vCenter, and it's going, well, I can tell you about this data center, and then the VMs, the network, the hosts, the data stores in there. Very handy. You can also just go VC about, and it's going to provide you information about that instance of vCenter, which version, which build, which operating system type, UUID, stuff like that. Very simple. You can use it to interact directly with ASICSI host as well. Same thing, just that the username would be like root or some other user that you've defined. And you source that, and then again, govc ls, in this case I specified the VM because I just want to see the VM. In that case, I would only see the VMs running on that host, not on the other host part of the cluster, right? As I'm addressing a ASICSI host, important to know that there is no concept of data center object, right? So we need to clear that. Otherwise, GOVC is going to try to query the data center, and there is none, so it goes like, I don't find that data center there. So, clear so far? About same thing, in this case, it's going to then provide you information of that ASICSI host. Right. There are other ways of getting information about the ASICSI host, blah, blah. Just like. Now, if we look at the commands available within GOVC, you see all the types of objects there on the list. So it's about the cluster, data center, data stores, devices, distributed virtual switch, VMs, content library, folders, namespaces, blah, blah, all of them. You've got a command, you just type govc the command, and in this case, the ls, and then you've got the help, like if it's missing stuff, you can get some help with additional parameters. And you've got some examples at the top there that show you how to use that command. Those examples are non-exhaustive. You can do much more with that, with much more parameters. It's just a question of, what do you need to achieve? What are you looking to get from it? If I'm looking at things that I can do with, for example, a virtual machine, I just type govc VM dot something. I'm missing, and then it's giving you the list of all the commands that you can use for that specific object. And you see that there are lots, right? I'm not going to go through all of them. Since we are time limited, so we need to stay within reasonable time, which is always a struggle with me, if you know me. But still, and then if you want to use one of those commands, then you just type the command with -h, and you've got the help for that command, right? So in this case of VM create, we've got samples, examples, and a few, a slew of parameters, and then you can have like the short one, just create and a VM name, or then you can have much more specific, like amount of cores, memory, blah blah blah, right? Is it okay so far? Cool. You won't see much UI. It's very much a lot of text, but to help you see what I've got in the UI and what I've got in text, right? This is a small lab that I use for preparing this session. So if I do govc ls, well, I did specify a virtual data center in this one, but you see here I've got only one data center. If you've got multiple data centers, you would see that as well. I can query VM, network, host, data stores. If I specify the host, ls host, I see that I've got two clusters defined in my instance, which are there on the left, and you see here I've got the management cluster and the workload cluster, right? If I want to look at the data stores, that's like as well two clusters. These are two vSAN clusters, so I've got two vSAN data stores available as well. Simple. So this is how you can just quickly look around with that command. Every object that you see there, we can then take it and do GOVC ls and that specific object to see if we've got more information, specifically like folders and stuff like that. So this is where, in this case, I did take a cluster. I did GOVC ls that object to that cluster, and you see that we've got ESXi hosts, resource pools, and VMs. So, and here I've got a long list, which is non-exhaustive. The stream doesn't go all the way down. But what you see there is actually a bit of everything. You see resource pools and you see networks, plenty of stuff, right? So that's where you will kind of filter down further. Still okay so far? In this case, if you want only the VMs, I've got this set of VMs as well. Another handy, like because all the text is not always readable, you can also just request for tree view. That's where then you see under the cluster, you've got the data stores, the host, the resource pools, the work, and then you've got the networks below there, and so forth, right? This is nice to look at, not great for scripting. That is nice and interesting. Now, we've looked around something. Now, let's look at doing something with that, right? So one thing I would like to use as an example is, okay, I'd like to create a content library and import an OVA into the content library. And then later in the session, what we'll do is use that OVA and deploy a creative VM with that, right? So the content library is object library. It's not content library, that would be too long. So it's just library.something. And I'm going to use the create function and the import function. Video can, Why? Why? Houston, we've got, sorry, not my laptop, and there seems to be, yeah, I lost internet connectivity. Great. Why? I'm sorry, Houston, we've got a small problem. I think the Wi-Fi just said box. Sorry for that. Going to great. So, there is a bit of UI. So this is an existing environment. There are already, Jesus Christ, the Beamer is not helping. There are already content library present, right? So, okay-ish. Okay. So, when you create a content library, you need to store the data in that content library on the data store, right? So I need to identify first data store I can use for that. That's why I do just ls data store. Yep, sir. Sorry. Here, right? So GOVC ls data store, and I told you I've got two clusters, two data stores. If I look at the help, right, you see I've got GOVC library creates the library name, but I've got this option below to specify the data store, which is a -ds equals. And that's why you need to have that specific format of data to feed that in. So this is the command I'm using here. So GOVC library create to that data store that I've collected from GOVC ls data store. I give it a name, the content library, right? I get like a UID as returned that it's been done. And if I do an ls, I see, yeah, library.ls, list the libraries. I see the content libraries, and I can see that the demo is in there as well, right? And if I refresh the UI, well, I've got an additional content library, which obviously is empty because I just created it. Now, I'm going to, you can also query info, and you've got additional info on there, as well as to the data stores and some policies assigned to it. I've got a OVA of a photon OVA. So to import an OVA into a library is very straightforward. GOVC library import, the library name, and the OVA, off you go. Very straightforward, right? Come on, move. So that's what I've done here. And it starts the import. Okay, that one I'm going to fast forward because it does take some time to get through. And then you see that it starts. It does the import of from that Linux instance I've got into the content library directly. Eventually, if all goes well, right? Tick, just refresh, and there's my OVA. Small refresh. Yeah. There's my OVA import. So a few simple commands, like one-liners, and I've got my import done. Mazi. Now, before I go forward, I need to mention JQ and Json Query, because one of the things that we can do is collect a lot of information, and one way of getting that information is in a structured format that is a JSON document, which is very handy to then play with and get data. Once you've got that JSON document, JQ is a very handy tool to play with. But you need to learn to use it. It's a bit like the first time you use that, it's like black magic. This is a link to the official page of JQ and tutorials and so. But basically, what you need is something that generates a JSON. Can be anything, like you can have a JSON. It's just cat the JSON, or echo, or whatever. Something that, and then you just pipe it to JQ, and then in there you just give it a filter, like show me everything, or I want to see only a subset. And writing the filter is black magic, right? And I'm going to introduce you to that black magic today, if you don't know about it. There was someone else using JQ, right? If I can't answer you, is on, right? So let's see about another live demo. Live. I mentioned the GOVC about, right? And I've got this text. We've seen that before. Now, if I just say JSON, I've got this JSON document as a result. That's very quickly. And in the JSON format, I've got more information than the text view. It was more like a summary view of that. Now, if I take that and I pipe it to JQ with just a dot, I've got the same thing. It's just that now I've got the colorized version, which is nicer to look at. What's interesting to look at here is the blue elements are the keys, right? And the green ones are the values. So I can now ask query on the keys to get the values, right? And that's very handy because that means that I don't have to do text manipulation on stuff. That's very much. Now, the thing here, and that is the challenge, because we've got nested elements, is if I want that nested element, I need to give it the path to that nested element. And finding the path can be sometimes a bit funky. So a first good approach is to use the filter like keys that gives you the keys that it sees at that level. And the first one is just about. So the next step is then to just say, well, give me dot about and give me the keys underneath that one. And you get the subsequent keys. And so you can go and see what you want. And then what I'm interested in here is, for example, the version. So please give me the version under about. And I got just a value. The previous one, and that's important to note here, is if it's a string, see, go back here, you see it's quoted. Don't go that fast. You see, all the values, the return that we get is in between quotes. Now, in scripting, I'm going to use that and assign it to a variable to use later. If I do that, it's going to be put in with the quotes, which can be annoying. So I want the data without the quotes. That's why I've got the -r to get the raw data from within that value, right? Small tip, but for scripting is handy. Now, this is just to show you, come on, next slide, there. Now, out of my project, I've got this unreadable script. That's fine, it's on purpose, not meant to read that. Code is in there. But basically, I was managing multiple factories across the world, and those were managed by other people. And sometimes, pre-sales, managing hardware and stuff, funky. So I wrote a script so that whenever I would log in or connect to that system, I would get a summary of like the health of the environment. And that gave me like, which version I've got, how many servers run. And then the hosts, are they poured on and connected? Because that host is not working in the cluster, that's annoying. And then also, as we create labs, consume resources, do I have enough storage? So I could get one quick report on the environment just in text in my SSH console. I'm going to show you how I create just this part, like this little thing here. Show me the data stores, and then show me how much capacity they have, how much is in use. Very basic stuff, right? Again, demo. So, if I ask for data store.information, I've got this nice little view here, right? And you see information about capacity and free capacity in gigabytes. If I want to work with that, right, I can ask that in JSON format and pipe it to JQ. And that's why I've got this kind of view, right? And you see, I've got much more data than what I had in summary because I can see the VMs that's running in there and so forth. So again, see, very limited information. If I JQ, it's going to give me much more. Now, in this case, I'm going to go to the steps of getting the information I want. So first I ask for the keys. It tells me data store, and they show me the data store, and then it goes me a 0 and a 1. That's because these are not just like string, this is an array. And that's the index of the array value, elements. So, it's an array, so I need to put square brackets. And then I've got the content of the array. Something that in the beginning I struggled with, like, what's that 0 and 1? Okay, array, brackets, off you go. And then in my case, I'm interested in the summary view. So I do the bracket dot summary, and in there I've got these elements. So if I look at what I've got in summary, I've got some object ID and the name and the link, and then capacity, free space and stuff in a very like machine format. As you can see, it's just like bytes. So what I'm going to do now is use that, but potentially you can have multiple sort of data stores. What I'm interested in is in shared data stores, the one used by all the hosts in the cluster. So that's where in JQ, it's a query language. So you can query, you can search for stuff. So I'm like, okay, I want in the data store, I want the summary, but only, that's why I pipe, please select only those which in the data store summary have the key multiple host access actually equals to true. Because if I've got the local data store on the host, I'm not interested in that one, right? And then it returns, in my case, obviously, returns the two vSAN data stores. Again, with the same type of data. And in there, I don't want the full summary, I just want the name, the capacity, and the free space. So that's why, again, I pipe that, and then I say dot name, dot capacity, and I've got this format. Now, this is very interesting information, but I would like that in a table format and in human readable approach, right? Ready for it? Because it's a bit more work. It's the same thing, you just, give it a bit more, So it's just, let's add some more stuff. I'm going to have a table and I want column headers. So I just add the headers here. So I want name, capacity, free, and then used in percentage, please. And then I'll do my query, data store summary, select, and then I use name. But look, I can also do calculations here. So I just parentheses. I want the capacity divided by, and floor, I don't want something behind the comma. Free space, same thing, divide and floor. And then for the use space, just, capacity minus free space, percentage, floor. And this gives me the data in here. And then another very interesting stuff is, okay, now that you've got all of that, please present that to me in a tab separated value. That is the add TSV. And once I've got that, I'm using then another Linux tool, column tab. And this is like this piping of commands in Linux. And the result, by the way, move, right? There's some explanation there. Once you press enter, look at the execution speed as well. Tick. Come on, press the button, Eric. Press the button. Stop talking. I've done all the talking. Move. Tick. Right? That's more readable. And that is what I use then in my summary view whenever I logged in the system. Right? Oopsie, wrong button again. Now, we did create a content library, we did put an OVA. I want to use that OVA and deploy it. Oh, 10 minutes, great. Now, I'm going to use the deploy command, but I also need to feed information about that OVA, like parameters, like networks and stuff like that, right? So you can feed some of that as command line, but actually you can provide that as a JSON, as an input. And there's a nice little function here as well, is when you get an OVA from somewhere, there is information in there about what parameters you need to feed into that OVA to deploy it. Right? And that's always very nicely documented, but actually is in the OVA and you can query that. So let's see how I do that. Again. There. So I've got this OVA here. I still have that photon OVA. So I'm going to use a function called import.spec. And you just point it to the OVA. And it's going to generate that JSON format that has this information, right? And you see those parameters with, for example, the network mappings. How many networks mapping do I need to assign to it, right? And it's a JSON format. Nice. Let's do something funky with that. So what I do now is I take that and I just send it into a file, .json, and we'll work on that later. I need to connect to a network, so I need to find the network I want to use, and I know that I want to connect it to some form of management network. So I just GOVC in JSON format, give me what's under, the networks I've got, management networks. So in this case, as the one who has provisioned the environment has had a great idea of putting a space in the name of the object. I have to code that, otherwise it won't work. And then from the list, I just look for the object's name, and in there, show me the ones with MGMT for management. And the one I'm going to use is ls-mgmt, just for reference. So those are information I collect with GOVC as well. Then let's see that JSON file, right? So I've got the network mapping name that I need to assign. And Json Query allows you to query to read data, but actually you can also write data with it into the JSON file, because in this one, I want to take that network mapping name and I want to fill it with ls-mgmt. Ever done that? I'm thinking, okay, you learned something today. Yoo-hoo, right? And that generates me a new JSON object, right? With the network MGMT. But that's like in memory, it's not written. So I need to send it to a file. I can't send it to the same file, so that's why I'm using a temp file. And also, as I'm using vSAN, I need to set this provision to thin. And now I've got this deployment JSON ready to go with the parameters filled in. I go to the library. I want to have my content library. Show me the content. Oh, yeah, that's my content. But I want to see the content, so I need to put a slash in there. And that's where, that's a bit funky. Got me my head scratching. I want to see the content. Oh, it's the same, but just need to put a slash and then you see the content. Okay, now you know, right? And that gives me the path to that template, right? And now I've got this command, it says deploy with a JSON file onto that data store, that vSAN, into that resource pool. That image is the content library with the OVA and give it the name Photon Demo Vima. And then if I look here, it's fetching the image from the content library, pushing that to the host. Fast forward a little bit, right? It's deploying the OVA, transfer file, blah, 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 blah. And then if I go look, I had only one photon machine and I've got a second one deployed, right? And that done by just GOVC. Now I can see the photon, I can get information about it, I could point on and so forth and so forth. Right? Thank you. Come on. Now, I've been working with labs. You've been working with hands-on labs. You've been, ever used a remote console on virtual machines? Yes? Yes? Am I the only one that is annoyed by the fact that I'm using a non-QWERTY keyboard and that typing password and a special key is always a nightmare because the engineering in the US have never thought that some people in the world would not use a QWERTY keyboard? Annoying as hell. So actually there's this command VM keystroke that allows you to send keystrokes remotely to that VM. And let's see an example. Again. So I've got a virtual machine over there, and I've got a little script here. You need a little script to do that recurringly. And I'm going to log in remotely onto that machine. And so what I do here is first I get a list of all the VMs. So, okay, on which VM you want to work. I go to that Photon VM, and then, oh yeah, I'm using root. And then I want to specify the password, which is a very specific password, right? And then, boom, I'm in. And now I've got this loop that says, whatever I type, it sends to the other one, right? And so I LS, I clear, I pay the... So this is not going through SSH or whatever. This is straight onto the remote console. And the thing is, I can now, for example, issue whatever type of command you might need to send, right? I'm going to create a small file. I said I'm going to create a small file. Thank you. See this? Like type faster, use slow. And then you can fill data in there. You can even copy paste multiple lines with special characters and so forth. Right, so let's paste something here, right? Good idea. Like multiple lines, so copy paste, and off it goes, right? Now in this case, there are also commands to do Control C, whatever. In this case, I'm doing that. That works on the remote console, so I'm cheating a little bit here. But it helped me a lot for some times when you had to debug something. It's handy. And if you look at the content of the little file, so yes, me happy. Very handy little thing. So we've seen how to query data, how to manipulate, how to import data, right? I haven't shown you all the features of GoVC, but you can imagine we can do a lot. What are potential limitations of GoVC, or where you might struggle a little bit, or at least where I did, right? vSAN is a great technology. The support of vSAN is very limited, today at least. Back in the day, they did add some vSAN features to enable it and then use autoclaim to put all the disks. But autoclaim has been removed from vSAN. That's not recommended anymore. So, well, they haven't done anything else in there. So there you go. Alternative, well, you can use PowerCLI, PowerShell, whatever, different, just curl the API directly. Documentation is there. There's plenty of documentation. But practical example, that's where like I'm giving you so many pointers here. There are a lot of release notes, and sometimes they do some breaking changes. This one got me pissed off. They introduced camel case for labeling the keys, which means that the first word in the key is like lowercase, and then all the substitute is like uppercase. But if you've got a query that you've written on specific keys, Linux is case sensitive, so if one case changes, it says, nope, don't have that one. I had to review all my code to change all the cases, and during the preparation of this demo, more keys changed again. So that was fun. Not. Glowing thoughts. GOVC is a great tool, and it's very fast. Actually, it's faster than PowerShell and so forth, because you don't have to do that. It's very lightweight. But, you know, it's not a religion. If you're happy with PowerShell or any other tool, fine. Use what works for you. It's not perfect either. You can combine tools, right? You can combine PowerShell, GoVC, and so forth. JQ is very nice. It needs a bit of learning on how to do those filters in query, right? I gave you a lot of hints here, so that should be a good start. For those of you who also need to work with YAML files, there's a YQ, which is the same thing as JQ for JSON, but that's for YAML. So for example, if you have to do Kubernetes and stuff, that's great. If you want notes, and this is a link to the presentation. I'll come back to that one in a moment, but please don't forget to take the survey. And that's it for me today. Thank you. If you've got questions, that would be outside because we're getting kicked out of the room. Thank you for coming. Hope it was worth it. You learned something, and maybe you now decide to never again connect to a Linux system and you want to stick to Windows and PowerShell. Who knows? Thank you for coming.